Allô, Nissan? Hey, grosse tempête, hein?
Hey, Karine, oui, je sais, les vilains bonhommes de neige sont de retour.
Mais avec le Nissan Rogue à traction intégrale, c'est pas stressant.
Exact, il est conçu et testé pour nos hivers. Oh, Karine, il y a un bonhomme dans le Rogue.
Ah, c'est correct. J'ai allumé les sièges chauffants.
Ah, bien joué, Karine. Maîtrisez toutes les conditions. Louez le Rogue S 2026 à partir de 0,4% jusqu'à 36 mois, incluant une réduction fidélité de 0,5% pour les clients Nissan admissibles. Jusqu'au 2 mars, sur approbation de crédit, les conditions s'appliquent. Détails chez Nissan.
All right, welcome back to the Elias Macko Show. In the third hour of the program, we will be with you straight through until noon. Now, as trade tensions rise between Canada and the U.S., some are calling on Hydro-Quebec to cut power exports in retaliation. You want to try and put tariffs on us? We won't supply you with power. I've seen the comments online that even it should be targeted. Retaliation for this weekend, right before the Super Bowl. Take that, America. You can't watch the biggest game of the year. But with Canada supplying over 85% of U.S. electricity imports, experts warn a move like this could backfire, turning public opinion against Canada. Instead, some are suggesting we need to remind Americans on just how much they rely on Canadian energy. Get a load of this. Hydro-Quebec powers 2 million U.S. homes annually. Let's find out a little bit more. Pierre-Olivier Pinault is with us, a professor at HEC Montréal and chair in energy sector management, specializing in energy policy and electricity reforms. Pierre-Olivier, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
So, what's your take on this? Any thoughts of turning off the power to the U.S.? Well, when you hear someone say that, what's your reaction?
Well, it's not that easy to turn off the power because the truth is that right now we are importing from New York. So some electricity, it's minor, but we're still importing. So yes, we are a net exporter of electricity, but in the New York market, it's about 1% of the New York market. Last year, that was the share of Quebec export. In New England, we are more like 10% of the market, which is significant. But we have to recall that New England's are our friends. Maybe we want to fight Trump and his crazy tariffs, but do we really want to go against our friends in New England and New York? I'm not so sure it's a good strategy.
And just I want to touch on the point that you brought up here, right? So on the coldest days of the year, right, when consumption goes through the roof in this province, during the mornings especially, we import electricity, right? We're getting it from our neighbors, so we rely on them at times as well. I just want to reiterate on that point. Just how much does that happen?
Well, during some hours we do import, and because prices are favorable for imports, then we do import from New York in relatively more often these last weeks and months. But we keep exporting to New England. We keep exporting to New Brunswick. We do import from Ontario because Ontario has lots of electricity cheap. So we don't, nobody's questioning the Ontario and New Brunswick trade. But we were a big exporter, but last year and the year before, because of low rainfalls, then we could export much less volumes to the U.S. So Hydro-Quebec has already cut its export.
Gotcha. And some would argue, and I've heard the Premier talk about this, lofty goals of, becoming the battery of the Northeast of the United States. What would you say on that front? Like, as far as energy strategy goes and energy policy, should we be doubling down? You mentioned the 1% New York, 10% in New England. Should we be trying to double that, triple that?
Well, the idea of becoming a battery is not to increase exports, but to also increase imports. Because what's going to happen in the future, regardless of what Trump does, is that New England and New York will add a lot of offshore wind in their generation portfolio. So that will mean they will have surpluses of electricity during some hours. And when they have surpluses, it will be cheap. So we would be, doing a good thing to buy that electricity, keep our water in the dams, and that's the battery. Our dams are a battery. And when the price is high in the U.S. because there's less wind, then they will need electricity and we can sell them back some electricity. So we shouldn't see Quebec as a net exporter, but really as a battery to basically buy when prices are low and export when prices are high. And that will be to the benefit of Americans because in New England and New York, they're adding a lot of wind, especially offshore wind. Mm-hmm. So that's why I still believe in this concept of becoming the battery of the Northeast, because we do have these huge reservoirs that are big assets for Quebec.
So let's talk beyond the bluster of Donald Trump, right? Obviously, you have a president of the United States that talks a big game and makes a lot of threats. But beyond that, the other people, the other smart people in the rooms, the premiers, the governors, and all of those other officials, do they actually understand that we've got a mutually beneficial relationship? Is that beyond Donald Trump, or do you think the cooler heads will prevail?
Yeah, the governors and premiers, they do understand that trade is good, but they haven't yet understood the full extent of the potential benefit of adding more trade in electricity across our states and provinces. So I do believe that in the longer run or mid-run, Trump will just, and it's difficult to understand ideas about tariffs will just disappear. And there will be more rationality in the development of trade, but there's still a lot of more collaboration and integration to be developed between the U.S. And it's not the U.S., it's with our neighbors, with Ontario and New Brunswick. Even in the Atlantic provinces, there's a much more trade that could be implemented to help everyone decarbonize and get lower, cheaper electricity.
We're with Pierre-Olivier Pinault from HEC Montréal. He specializes in energy policy and electricity reforms. Pierre-Olivier, I want to ask you about the leverage we have. What leverage do we have in Quebec, in Canada, and how should we be using that in this trade battle?
The big leverage is oil. And oil will really, if Trump basically hits Canadian oil exports with a 10% tariff, that will, of course, hurt the Americans a lot. It will hurt Alberta a lot, but it will hurt the Americans themselves because they are buying that oil from Canada because it's cheap. So if it's 10% more expensive, it will be $5-10 more per barrel. Your refiners won't like that. American refiners. So I think the best tool for ourselves is basically let Trump do whatever he wants, and he'll hurt themselves, and then reason will prevail again.
And what about the talk we've heard? And I heard the premier talking about it this week when he was asked about pipelines, right? And a pipeline through Quebec. And he did bring up the fact that there's no social acceptability for a pipeline project. But he almost left the door open that perhaps Donald Trump is changing that. What do you think on that end? Do you think, long-term our policy should be pipelines east to west and west to east?
Well, I think for pipeline, the window of opportunity is closed now because we're really slowly but certainly phasing out oil of our energy mix. It will take time, but the market will decrease. So I don't think in terms of long-term investment, it can actually do something because we should have built it a few years ago, 10 years ago, but now I don't see private investors coming in and investing the billions of dollars in the declining market. So I don't think it's a good investment.
Does that also apply to thoughts of shipping natural gas, Quebec's natural gas to Europe?
Natural gas, I'm more positive about that. I think Europe will need liquefied natural gas. So I think if one project could go on and then restart, it's really the LNG Quebec project to liquefy natural gas from Alberta to ship it to Europe. And then for that, we already have a natural gas pipeline coming all the way to the border of Quebec. So there would only be a short new natural gas pipeline to build, and that I think would be feasible.
Feasible and politically acceptable? Like, you think there'd be the political wherewithal and the social acceptability to make it happen?
I think if the Europeans were really saying, we are willing to sign a long-term contract to get your natural gas, I think that could work with the Canadian population because we would understand it's to help Europeans. It would help us diversify our exports. And the Europeans are actually committed to the energy transition. So they need to phase out their coal. They need some natural gas. They don't want to get it from Russia. They get it now a lot from the U.S. So I think there's an opportunity for Canada to redevelop that project.
All right, Pierre-Olivier, listen, we're going to have to leave it there. I want to thank you so much for coming on this morning and a great discussion. Thanks again.
Thank you very much for having me.
Pierre-Olivier Pinault is a professor at HEC Montréal, specializes in energy policy and electricity reform.